Okay, we're gonna go ahead and kick off this meeting. So thank you everybody for joining us today. We're very excited to bring you another side of Black history, a very special panel in which we are going to be talking about Black history, closing out Black History Month. As we have yet another year of ongoing genocide, the capitalists have tried to pacify us with commercials, social media posts, and pitiful handouts. They think they can give us a month and a bit of lip service, and we will go back quietly to the plantation. Our history cannot be contained in a month, and neither can our demands. Today, we are asking what we have been asking for since they first kidnapped our ancestors, and what the Panthers formalized through the 10-point program, asking for freedom, the death of capitalism, housing, education, abolishment of the police and military, freeing of all our siblings from their dungeons, food, and reparations. The capitalist history is a farce. Their teachings nothing more than racist propaganda designed to enforce a white supremacist imperialist agenda, which gives the West license to continue their global plunder. Never ever has capitalism saved our people. Capitalism was created through our blood and bodies, and it thrives on our misery and death. Our history is a communist history. Africa, our motherland, carries the traditions of community and care for all. While the US supported apartheid, the USSR fought it. While the US was turning fire hoses, dogs, and guns against us, Che was in the Congo. When they turned chemical weapons against us in Ferguson, Palestine rallied in solidarity. We will not be saved by their rhetoric, their handouts, or their charity. Only when we recognize our power and decide to organize will we take what the people deserve by smashing capitalism. I'll just close out with a couple of quotes from one of my favorite Black leaders of all time, Lucy Parsons. Concentrated power can be always wielded in the interest of the few and at the expense of many. Government, in its last analysis, is the power reduced to a science. Governments never lead, they follow progress. When the prisons, stake, or scaffold can no longer silence the voice of the protesting minority, progress moves on a step, but not until then. And a second one, just to close out, so many able writers have shown that the unjust institutions which work so much misery and suffering to the masses have their root in governments, and we owe their whole existence to the power derived from governments. We cannot help but believe that wherever every law, every title deed, every court, and every police officer or soldier abolished tomorrow with one sweep, we would be better off than now. So next, I'm going to go ahead and start our program by welcoming Reverend Annie Chambers from the Socialist Unity Party and PPA based in Baltimore, and she'll be sharing her reflections on being in the Black Panther Party. Welcome, Reverend Annie Chambers.
Thank you very much. When I look back over the years in the party and being asked questions by younger people now and just by, people in general, what the party stood for, and I see some of the rhetoric and lies. That's what some of the stuff is about the party. I feel that we owe it to our young people to teach what the Black Panther Party was about. It was about self-preservation, respecting ourselves and others, and demanding respect from others, learning how to take care of ourselves, and demanding that we be given a fair. We were not a civil rights organization. We was an organization that said we as a people have a right to stand. So when I look at what happened during the time of the Black Panther Party, a lot of the things that we started has been copied. The free breakfast program come from the Black Panther Party. Even the free lunch program come from the Black Panther Party. We did a lot to build up our communities and our neighborhoods and our people. A lot of the stuff that's happening now would not have happened under the reign of the Black Panther Party, because we took pride in ourselves and our people, and we taught pride And so we know that because of this, I feel because of this very strongly, that the greedy powers that be had to try to crush us and did crush a lot of us. You can try to break us, but you don't break our spirit. A true panther never gets broken.
Thank you, Reverend Annie. Was there anything else that you wanted to share?
No, except I'm saying it's been over 50 years and I'm still fighting.
Absolutely.
So I'll be 80 years old the 18th of August of this year, and I'm still fighting. So like I said, you can never crush our spirit. You will never stop us from fighting. True Panthers, and we know this, when you take the oath to become a Panther, when you become a Panther, you notice that you for a Panther forever. So I don't call myself a former Panther. I am a Black Panther.
Thank you. Well, I think we all have no excuse not to be fighting every day. Reverend Chambers has been in the fight, out in the streets through COVID. I would see her post. She's out in the streets distributing food, taking care of people. So thank you for continuing to be an inspiration and a leader and continuing to hold our history for us and know where we need to be going. So next, I'm going to welcome our next speaker, Dr. Robert BIRT from Baltimore. Dr. BIRT went to both Morgan and Vanderbilt. He's been in the movement since the 60s as a teenager. And he's going to tell us more about the philosophy of actually changing the world, not just talking about it. So everyone, please welcome Dr. BIRT.
Hello. I don't know how well prepared I am, but let me just say the following. Sister Annie Chambers talks about the legacy of the Black Panther Party, and it's kind of interesting because you see, I belong to the same generation as the children of, I guess, Martin and Malcolm. I was certainly aware that a movement was going on. I mean, I sort of grew up with it. And yet, ironically, I think what may have radicalized me, and even some members of my family to a certain extent, was tragedy in a certain way. My mother, may she rest in peace, a very Southern, traditional Christian Black woman, became pro-Panther after Martin Luther King was killed. We started having Panthers visit our home. We either took their newspapers, and I lived in Latrobe Crossing at the time, but on Valley Street. If you know East Baltimore, the Panthers had their breakfast program right down their streets. They were right around the corner. So I encountered with them fairly often, and sometimes I ate it with the breakfast program, and try to get into the political education piece. But that and the assassination of Fred Hampton, it may be that the establishment, the ruling class, intended to intimidate or to de-radicalize us by means of these acts of terror. If anything, it made me more convinced that the existing social order cannot be reformed. It has to be dismantled and a new society created. It's very interesting. And I've even mentioned this in some of my writings, and sometimes I'll talk to some of my students that, I mean, this sounds ancient history to them. I said, believe it or not, I used to be a young man. But point number one, I've been concerned about the issue of community for the longest time. It's a very interesting thing about this. The very first point of the 10-point program, the Black Panther Party, we want freedom. We want the power to determine the destiny of our Black community. This is very important. It's even important, it was very practically important when I was engaged in stuff, and now even as a teacher and a thinker is very important. The primacy, the priority of community. And this is not in any way a denial of human individuality, but what it is an understanding that you cannot understand community in the narcissistic, liberal individualistic way that has been come to be understood in a capitalist society. But the Panthers would understood, and this has been a matter of new concern, is this: to really achieve freedom, even to actualize ourselves in terms of our the flowering of the human personality, you have to have a free community. You can only have a free individual in a community of freedom. And so there's a dialectical interrelationship between being a social being and being an individual person. It's very important. The Panthers did not define freedom as I just got my own thing, you got your own thing, we just all do our own thing, right? My freedom, and King liked to say that, right? We're all interdependent. I can never be what I ought to be unless you are what you ought to be. So what they emphasize is the importance of freedom, right? As much as a social as well as a personal reality, right? And of course, you can't just talk about this in some abstract moral sense. You also have to understand the structural and particular material basis of community. And let me be very clear, there's no such thing as human freedom without a community of freedom. Let's be very clear about that. But you gotta have a material basis for it too. Hence, I guess it's the third, I forget now, point of the Black Panther program. We demand end to the robbery of our community, robbery of the Black, by the capitalists of our Black community, right? We need to think about this, right? Underlying the whole phenomena, the whole disease of racism is a system of exploitation. Why was there a slave trade to begin with? It wasn't just because Europeans didn't like people with dark complexion. It's promoted by the profit motive. And Black people who think that we are going to achieve our freedom, at least for the mass of Black people, by trying to get on the cap or trying to be Black capitalists, we're deluding ourselves. We will have to create a cooperative society, right? It's in a cooperative, free community that each human being can realize him or herself fully as a human being. But this isn't compatible with capitalism. So to create real community, and we have a capitalist system which erodes human source, erodes community. To even try to create community is already begin a struggle to negate the existing social and economic order. Some people talk about fair. Unfortunately, I did not join the Black Panther Party, not because I didn't want to, but at age 15 and 16, Mama said, no, that's too dangerous. In fact, they wouldn't allow me to go around the office. They said, you go to the breakfast program, go to the educational thing, because some of them was held in churches, but not the office because they were afraid of police raids. And why were the police raids? And why, just enough, was the FBI more worried about Panther education and the programs than they were about Panthers carrying guns? Isn't that interesting? Because the programs were giving a concrete example of a cooperative community. And the educational thing involved what? A transformation of consciousness. They try to halt that by means of force and violence, but I think Fred Hampton's words are going to prove prophetic. You can jail a revolutionary, but you can't jail the revolution. I was very clear about it. I know some people are excited because Trump is gone and Biden is in. To me, it's sort of like ho-hum. We've seen this before, right? Oh, I'm not going to deny, Trump, frankly, I think he was a fascist. But what is the system that produces fascism? And the kinds of politics that we see with the Democratic Party helps create the conditions which actually enable people like a Trump. Just as in some other countries, it enabled people like a Mussolini or a Hitler. So we got to think about something different, right? Something radically different. That is part of what I've been involved in practically, and even as a teacher, as somebody engaged in philosophical research, my focus has been on community. That is what I've been concerned about. To create a community of freedom in which every human being can live with dignity and decency. I think I'll leave it.
Thank you, Dr. BIRT. We will go ahead and continue with the program. Don't forget to use the Q&A panel to start dropping your questions, because at the end of the program, we will have time for questions and discussion. So I know, I have a bunch of things on my mind. Go ahead and start dropping those things in there. Next, I want to welcome GLORIA VERDIEU. And GLORIA is an organizer for the Coalition to Free Mumia Abu-Jamal and all political prisoners, and a member of the Socialist Unity Party Black Caucus. So GLORIA is going to be uncovering the real Black history, highlighting heroes unmentioned, and also we're going to have a really incredible clip that I'll let her introduce as well. Welcome, GLORIA.
Thank you, Rebecca. Welcome, everyone. I am truly honored to be a part of this webinar, Another Side of Black History. Historian Carter G. Woodson and the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History announced the second week of February 1926 to be Negro History Week, 95 years ago. Negro History Week led to Black History Month, or African American History Month. Certainly, Woodson did not expect us to take a week out of the year to study Black history, nor should we expect to take a month to focus on African history. Political prisoner Mumia Abu-Jamal explains in one of his many commentaries on history, titled, "How Black is Our Black History Month?" Black History Month is a time to remember that which the corporate culture wishes is forgotten, a time to remember rebellion, resistance, and what it means to be Black in a white nation today. This year, 2021, our focus in the Socialist Unity Party Black Caucus will be to intensify the movement to release Mumia Abu-Jamal, Leonard Peltier, Russell Maroon Schultz, Matula Shakur, Sundiata Akulai, Imam Jamil, Rochelle McGee, all political prisoners, immediately. We joined the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression and others calling to take immediate steps to depopulate jails, prisons, immigrant detention centers, and juvenile facilities that are genocidal hotbeds for COVID-19 infections. And they're also death camps for millions. Mumia Abu-Jamal has written many commentaries on Black History Month. I've been involved in the movement to free Mumia and all political prisoners for many years. I went to a meeting in San Diego where Pam Africa, of Concerned Friends and Family of Mumia, was the keynote speaker, along with members of the MOVE organization. I bought Mumia's book, Live from Death Row, and after reading it, I was sure that we would succeed in stopping his execution. I also knew we would free him because it was clear to me that he was innocent. That was over 25 years ago. I joined the San Diego Coalition to Stop the Execution of Mumia, a group that met weekly at San Diego City College. We will begin each meeting by reading an essay by Mumia. My education about the prison industrial complex, the disparities of mass incarceration, state-sanctioned death sentences, and the US criminal justice system deepened. Mumia's Mumia's essays, I'm sorry about that. Mumia's essays are filled with Black people and Black people's movements that are left out of the Black History Month news stories and sensational events covered in mainstream media outlets. In 2003, Mumia wrote, "Why kids flunk history? 89% of US students at junior high school ages could not meet the requirements of American history at their grade level." Mumia writes from his own experience. He was born Wesley Cook in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At an early age, he witnessed and participated in student protests demanding Black studies in school. These protests were somewhat effective because Black student studies made it into Ben Franklin, the high school Mumia attended. One of his African culture teachers taught the students some Swahili and assigned them Swahili names. Wesley Cook took the name Mumia, which means prince, and at age 14 began using this name. His Black studies students hung pictures of Malcolm X and W.E.B. Du Bois so Black students would know what their leaders looked like. He learned about Africa and that Africans had a cultural heritage that predated slavery. Africa was not only the cradle of humanity, but the cradle of civilization. Knowing this opened the doors for him to want to know more, to read more. Mumia read the autobiography of Malcolm X, The Souls of Black Folks, and he took books home to read. I identify with Mumia's story. In my own education, born in the South, the Florida Panhandle, history was not one of my best subjects in high school. I favored math because I liked solving equations, and English literature because we got to choose what we wanted to read and write about. I didn't have an appreciation for history until I took American history from an African perspective at San Diego City College. The Black Studies Department at San Diego City College was created in 1971 through Black student activism, demanding that the administration create a Black Studies Department. Professor Nathan Katunji was my first introduction to African history. The required reading in the first course was Before the Mayflower by Lerone Bennett. At that time, I was thinking that this class was an easy A until I realized the history of Africa is huge. The contributions of African people worldwide is vast. I continue to learn and read about my African history in the Americas and around the world. So why? Why is it that kids flunk history? Mumia writes, "History must be more than the numbing lineup of great men and the reciting of dates from antiquity. They must tell the stories of real people who fought and still fight for freedom against great odds, for social justice, for the rights of women, for a broader view of a life which they can recognize and become a part of." Huey P. Newton's name, and more importantly, his history of resistance and struggle, is little more than a mystery for many young people in their 20s. The name and works of a third-rate rapper is more familiar to the average Black youth, and that's hardly surprising given the failure of the public school system. For the public school system is invested in ignorance, and Huey P. Newton was a rebel and more a Black revolutionary. As Black History Month is celebrated, who will remember Huey? No postage stamps will be printed to remember him. Too few school kids will learn his name, but outside of schools, in the streets, in barbershops, in bars, on playgrounds, his name will be remembered. Black History Month, the shortest month of the year, cannot hold the wealth of information guarded over the last 5 centuries of Black life in this new world. A world that is certainly not new to the native people who dwelled here an estimated 50,000 years before European invasion. African history should be a part of every discipline in all educational curricula, from kindergarten, high school, college, and on. Today, we continue to fight for Black studies, more broadly, ethnic studies, in all schools, especially public schools where most of our children attend. Black History Month should be a time to celebrate what we have learned and accomplished throughout years of reading, our experiences, current events, that we must study, analyze, and reflect on to determine how we are to move forward. Now I'm going to read a slightly edited version of Another Side of Black History by Mumia Abu-Jamal. The idea of Black History Month has always filled me with ambivalence. On the one hand, there is an understandably pride in the accomplishments of one's ancestors, people who fought long and hard for their place in the sun against monstrous odds and indeed against American white supremacist terrorism. They used every means imaginable to sustain themselves against a system that was predicated and dedicated to their spiritual, psychological, and material destruction. When one studies the life of Harriet Tubman or other freedom fighters like her, it is almost impossible not to be moved. On the other hand, the institutionalization of Black History Month by corporate and political America has resulted in a kind of dead history by which the uses of advertising and even stamps to promote historical figures, many from the distant past, who portray a safe side to a history that was and is anything but safe. There is a deep, troubling bourgeois factor in popular Black history that seems to remember the well-to-do yet ignores those who struggle among the ranks of the poor, who did not wear clean suits every day. I speak of the forgotten ones, those people who fought for freedom and Black liberation, not at news conferences or in editorial board meetings, but in the fields, in the shops, in the streets, among the people. In this new generation of bourgeois, safe, corporate Black history, people such as these make no real appearances. It is almost as if these agencies strive to create a kind of Black history light that will not disturb the sleep or the stomachs of white Americans. This is a shame and a disservice to both white and Black Americans and all who really want to know about the history of this country. It is therefore fitting to recall those names of people who live in the hearts and minds of their people and who in their own way fought for freedom, but are rarely mentioned in most history books. Here are a few. Ola Mae Quarterman, a bright, sensitive 18-year-old girl, boarded a bus in Albany, Georgia, and refused to move when the white driver ordered her to. She responded, "I paid my damn 10 cents and I'll sit where I please." When the segregationist trained driver began to wag his finger in her face, she quite rationally responded, "Get your damn finger out of my face." What happened next was in some ways like what happened in Montgomery, and in other ways different. Miss Quarterman was convicted of violating the segregationist laws and sentenced to 30 days in jail. The president of the local college where Miss Quarterman was enrolled expelled her, and the local support was so splintered that Miss Quarterman, alone and without support, drifted into despair and depression. Her life teaches us not the hopelessness of resistance, but the necessity of united action to resistance to social wrongs. She was right. Those who failed to support her for any reason were wrong. There is Margaret Morgan, a fugitive captive who fled to Pennsylvania in the 1840s and was seized by a slave catcher, Edward Prigg, under the Draconian Fugitive Slave Act of 1793. She was at the center of the case for her freedom hinged on the decision of the US Supreme Court Justice Joseph Story of Massachusetts, who was on the side of the slave catchers and gave the judicial blessing to the return of Margaret Morgan to the bitter bondage in the South with her children, the youngest born into a free state. The lesson: freedom proceeds from the struggle for freedom and not from the courts of the rich and influential. Will there be any postage stamps to honor the historical contributions of Dr. Huey P. Newton, founder of the Black Panther Party, or Fred Hampton? To Ramona Africa, the courageous fighter and resistor who suffered an urban Holocaust on May 13, 1985, or Assata Shakur, revolutionary and survivor of the Black Power movement in exile for over 40 years. To George or Jonathan Jackson, to Rochelle McGee, a brilliant jailhouse lawyer whose work has led to the freedom of over 40 young men, but who was perhaps the longest held Black political prisoner in the Americas. To the great Seminole warriors, Caucus, also called Wild Cat, and John Horse, who fought for red and Black freedom from the American slavers. Well, we think not. Black history isn't safe. It's challenging and troubling and speaks to the lives we live now under the illusion of freedom. It ain't Martin Luther King alone, but the many who followed and the many who did not. Why not a Black Liberation Month that will concentrate our minds not only on history, but on the sometimes painful lessons of history? But more importantly, it will point us to the undiscovered land that beckons us all, the future. Imprisoned radio journalist Mumia Abu-Jamal's death warrant was signed twice by the state. He came dangerously close to execution on August 17, 1995 and December 2nd, 1999. It was the mobilization of a mass international movement that saved his life. Today, Mumia is in poor health, suffering from cirrhosis of the liver, the result of a recent near-fatal bout with hepatitis C. On Friday, February 26th, Friday, Pam Africa got a call from Mumia telling her he is suffering from COVID-19 symptoms. He's having difficulty breathing and he's having chest pain. Mumia is 67 years old with pre-existing conditions, a high risk for getting COVID-19, and he thinks he has COVID. This is an urgent moment because Mumia rarely talks about his own condition. The International Concerned Family and Friends are demanding the immediate release, treatment, and hospitalization, not solitary confinement, of Mumia. At a Saturday rally, organizers called for not only the release of Mumia and all inmates, but all inmates older than 50 and anyone who is medically vulnerable. Now, for an update and a clear picture of the case of Mumia and what you can do during his release, visit the Mobilization for Mumia Facebook page and the Jamal Journal that was created by the International Concerned Friends and Family of Mumia. I think the link is going to be put in the chat. And also on Saturday, March 6th, the Mobilization for Mumia, the campaign to bring Mumia home, and the International Concerned Friends and Family of Mumia, Abu-Jamal is having a global street meeting with a special appearance from Fred Hampton. Freedom has never been so close. Free Mumia Abu-Jamal and all political prisoners and all prisoners. Thank you for listening. Now next, we will play an audio commentary by Mumia called Fred Hampton Reborn. And then we'll open the discussion about the film, Judas and the Black Messiah. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you.
Fred Hampton Reborn. It was December 4th, 1969, early morn, when most people turn over in their sleep, when a creeping death squad of Chicago cops raided an apartment on Monroe Street in a premeditated plan to murder Deputy Chairman Fred Hampton, 21-year-old leader of the Illinois Black Panther Party and a master organizer. Sleeping beside him was his young wife, Deborah, and sleeping within her, under her heart, was a black baby boy who was swimming in a salty sea, inches away from his father, whom he would never look upon. For Chicago cops, aided and abetted by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI and a traitorous black snitch, were determined that Fred Hampton would not live another day. The cops, black cops among them, shot over 100 bullets into the Monroe Street apartment, killing Fred and Captain Mark Clark, a young Panther visiting from Peoria, Illinois. Typically, the cops lied for weeks about the raid until independent investigations proved it wasn't a shootout, but a shoot-in, with cops firing 100 shots and a Panther, Captain Clark, firing one as they came through the door. Panthers were shot in their beds. Fred was dosed with secobarbital, a barbiturate, laced into his soda by Panther trader William O'Neill, he slept through his own assassination by government agents. Some 3 weeks later, Fred's wife would give birth to their child, who would come to be known as Fred Hampton Jr., a young man who, like his martyred father, has a deep and abiding love for his people and is an energetic organizer and gifted speaker. I asked him about his early days. Was he put down with his dad's Panther and political history, or was he protected by not being told things until he was older? He answered,
well, basically, upbringing an organization. In other words, my mama and the movement played a key role in my upbringing. To be informed of the impact that not only the chairman Fred, but as well as the organization he's part of, the Black Panther Party, powerful impact that they had not only on African people, but humanity in general.
His thoughts about today's black political and community leadership is especially insightful.
We like to see that there are no foregone conclusions, that to make the distinction from those that the state sanctioned, quote-unquote, leaders, as opposed to those that come from the masses. They come from the valley. You put into practice a slogan that we like to say that, we work for the people. The streets are our office. Concrete, that's our desk. Our secretary consists of the street soldiers. I got a tremendous amount of love, respect for those who are here on a day-to-day basis. Those who are not is what Malcolm referred to as the quote-unquote responsible leaders. You know what I'm saying? The ones that the state don't want you to know about. You know what I'm saying? The ones that's sincere about the freedom of our people. And I know also we have to create such a groundswell, be so intense, that it forced these state-sanctioned cats, you know what I'm saying, to get out the arena or at least fake the funk up the ante. That we don't make it cool for them to use euphemisms no more. They no longer, they say police brutality. Recognize it for what it is, police terrorism. No longer, gentrification or urban renewal, call it for what it is, the land grab. And they might not be one of, we clear they ain't gonna be on no front line of riders, but they have to have some point of unity addressing issues on political prisoners, the miseducation of colonial schools. Don't feel comfortable and don't be allowed use as tools or pawns when the ruling class start throwing them in to hijack our struggles and throw us up our so on and so forth leadership. We ain't doing no liberalism, because we not playing for no higher position and no titles. Our lives are at stake. Our lives are at stake. We just got to do our job. They got to be clear. They can play a role. They cannot, these cats can't come on. Can't hijack our struggle.
Not surprisingly, he's the spitting image of his father. But more importantly, the fighting spirit of Fred Hampton seems reborn in him. Like Fred, others have been born in the midst of state terrorism in Black America. Most know of the legendary early hours of Tupac Shakur, born to former Black Panther Afeni Shakur. Perhaps fewer know of Mike Africa Jr., the bright son of Mike and Debbie Africa, political prisoners of the August 8, 1978 police attack on MOVE headquarters. Mike literally was born in jail. Indeed, because MOVE women knew that the state would separate mother and child, they hid the birth for several weeks, going down to the mess hall to get extra food for their sister Debbie so that her delivery wouldn't be noticed. He is today a revolutionary like his mother and father, just as Fred is the son of two revolutionaries, two sons, two movements, both revolutionaries of the longest war for freedom in the American empire. From Death Row, this is Mumia Abu-Jamal. These commentaries are produced by Noel Hanrahan for Prison Radio.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Gloria. Yes, that was beautiful, inspiring. That video was excellent. Next, we're going to bring up Larry Hales from Socialist Unity Party. And once again, we're going to be speaking about the film Judas and the Black Messiah and its resonance with today's struggles. We'll also be having some clips to go along with that. And we will, once again, we'll have time for Q&A and discussion. So we're really looking forward to that. So please welcome Larry Hales.
Hey everyone, thank you to everybody who spoke before me and people for having me here. I'd just like to say before I start, if you hear a bunch of racket in the background, I got little kids, so. I saw the movie. I was looking forward to the movie, like a lot of us were before it came out. And when I think about it, I think about when I went to see Malcolm X. I think it's very different from Malcolm X in a lot of different ways, but when the movie Malcolm X came out, I had just recently moved to Dallas, Texas from Erie, Pennsylvania, which is where I was raised. My parents were born and raised in Mississippi. My mother, Jones County, my dad, Jasper County, Mississippi. And they moved to, my mom was 16, my dad was 19, when they moved to Erie to get jobs in a factory. My dad worked as a janitor for a short while, and I was born. My oldest brother was born shortly after that, and then my other brother, and then I was born a few years later. So when I moved to Dallas, away from the Rust Belt, it was a deep impact on my emotional development, because I was separated from the place that I knew was home. Dallas is a much bigger city. It's in Texas. It was a different culture. There's a lot of different things. And so when the movie came out, Malcolm X, I had already been a fan of Spike Lee. I'd seen all of the movies before then. Even saw his thesis film that he made. I think it was Joe Bed-Stuy, We Cut Heads. And I had never, there was no YouTube, so finding speeches by Malcolm was very difficult. You could find records of his speeches, things like that, but I had never heard his voice. I had read the autobiography. And so when I saw Denzel Washington, you know, he, to me, embodied Malcolm. I didn't know how Malcolm sounded. So every time I would hear those speeches, I would hear Denzel's voice and not Malcolm's voice, which I didn't hear until sometime later. But the impact that it had on me was I sat there as the movie began, and then as it ended, I stayed in the theater for about 5 minutes afterwards, listening. I wasn't really listening to Aretha Franklin's rendition of Someday We'll All Be Free, but it was playing over the credits. And I sort of sat there because I couldn't move. It was, you know, personal circumstance mixed with anger, you know, and political ardor that just wouldn't allow me to actually get up from my seat and move. And the majority of people who were in the theater, I don't know what they were thinking, what they were feeling, but, you know, everyone in the theater stayed. People didn't applaud after the film ended. There was this silence, and it was a mourning silence, but it was a mixture of other things, I'm sure. And Judas and the Black Messiah had a similar impact. And afterwards, like a lot of people do, I began to read some of the articles that people were writing and some things that people were saying before the film even came out. And unfortunately, that has been happening to a number of Black films that come out. And it's unfortunate. And it's not that there isn't criticism that can be made about some of the choices that were made. We have to be able to contextualize things, not just in the period that we're living in, socially, politically, but also the aims of the directors and what we can withdraw from the film that is important, that can be used. And is there anything that's important that can be gotten from the film? I think in this particular instance of Judas and the Black Messiah, one of the criticisms being that O'Neill was given equal standing in the film, and he was in the film. The film starts with him with there's the dramatization of the interview, the last interview, I think the only interview he did, which is on the Eyes on the Prize documentary, which aired the second part of the two-part documentary that two series that aired the same day that William O'Neill committed suicide. And there's a dramatization of that where it's actually Lakeith Stanfield who's doing it. So it begins on that, and then it starts moving into some documentary footage of the period, as well as with interviews with people like Huey Newton and speeches given by H. Rap Brown, and a talk by Angie Davis and Bobby Seals and a few other people. So it may be that they spent more time on O'Neill, and it certainly ended on him as well, as he was in the restaurant. And people would say, well, why spend that much time on someone who was a snitch and who was a rat? I think it's important to unpack that. And I think if we look at the history that we're in, we see, you know, from my point of view, I see more people who are more like O'Neill's than they are like Chairman Fred Hampton, unfortunately. It's the same type of, unfortunately, I mean, these are people that are thrusting, who we see a lot because they have a large platform, and there's a reason for that. But it's an instinct that arises out of one of the predominant crises that we face, and that's a political crisis, well, political and ideological crisis that exists in general in US society, as well as a rightward political shift and a long winter that we've been through since the smashing of the liberation movements in the US, and the entire political shift rightward of even the bourgeois parties, but in politics in general, not just in the US, but internationally. So it's been a very long period that we've all come through. And that has had an impact, not just in politics and ideology, but socially on how young people are developing versus other periods. You can understand looking at history how someone like Muhammad Ali would develop because of everything that was happening at that point in history. We see that less and less. And when we do see people developing politics, they're within liberal establishment politics. Like, it's not as if, you know, we see people in the NBA wearing Black Lives Matter t-shirts, but, you know, they're not calling for revolution. They're very much plants who are there to, I mean, this is not necessarily plants, but their ideology and their belief system is very much in line with the bourgeois parties in the United States and the ruling class. And, you know, they're neo-colonial leaders, so they feel that their livelihood, their existence is much more in line with that class than it is with the masses of their own people. You know, when you see someone like Lil Wayne who's posing with Donald Trump and taking pictures and supporting Donald Trump's run, that's, you know, very much like a William O'Neill. And I think that that's one of the key things about the choice that the director made. I mean, first we have to admit the fact that he was going for a thriller. The movie plays like a thriller. He was looking at something similar to The Departed, but it couldn't have all the trickery that's in The Departed because it was dealing with real life situations and real people. So all the turns and twists that exist in The Departed, it couldn't necessarily be in this because this is a real story. Not that he didn't add some things that didn't actually happen, but there's only so much that he could do that. But it also juxtaposes the ideology, belief system, what guides someone like Fred Hampton and the self-preservation of someone like William O'Neill. I was just reading Huey P. Newton parts of Revolutionary Suicide, where he talks about, you know, and Fred Hampton in real life, when he gave the speech about, when he talked about I'm a revolutionary, and the one where he's talking about where you ask to make a commitment, and they show parts of that in the film, understanding that the choices that he made and other people like that made means that they were marked. It's not that they wanted to die. Everyone wants to live a fulfilling life, but you understand that when you live for the people and you struggle for the people, that there's a high possibility that you could die because of that. And that's what Huey P. Newton deemed revolutionary suicide. So I think that showing those two people at different spectrums, different belief systems, one being a person who was living and fighting for the people, one who was living and fighting for himself. I think that's effective. And I think that people can make a decision for themselves, and that the politics of the Panthers are very much in play and shown in the film, not just, you know, some of the programs that they actually have, but the way that some of the leadership and the people within the party went through the actions to care and fight for the community, and how the community actually responded, especially when the office was burned out and they were only able to rebuild the office because the community actually turned out to provide aid for them. So in the process of providing programs and aid for the community and that type of solidarity, the solidarity was reciprocal. The community came back in solidarity for the political leadership that existed there. So I think it was, you know, of course, it exists. There are the artistic merits of the film, but there's the social merits in terms of what it actually holds, the social and political importance that it holds for people in the community, people who are still in the political struggle, and people who are seeing it, who've heard about the Black Panther Party, heard about Chairman Fred Hampton, but have never done anything political and have never been in an organization, and what that actually does. And I would liken it to how I responded after seeing Malcolm X. The same year that Malcolm X came out was the same year of the Los Angeles Rebellion. I think the movie came out in November or December of that year. The LA Rebellion was in April. I think it started April 29th, 1992. I was still living in Pennsylvania. I hadn't gotten into trouble yet that made me have to leave Pennsylvania and move to Texas. That came that summer. But after the LA Rebellion, my response was I wanted to go and start a rebellion in Erie. What I wound up doing is stealing some steaks and some tortilla chips and salsa from Chi-Chi's Mexican restaurant. But going from that sort of piqued my interest in wanting to do something. And after seeing the film, I began to look for political organizations, and it led me to the Nation of Islam. That was the start of my political growth and development, was there. And I think that young people coming out of this film, they're not going to be as angered as some people who are already political about the focuses of the film. It's very likely, I think, especially in a period when there's been a huge growth in people in response to the repressive state. There's the impact of COVID-19 and the lacking infrastructure that exists in capitalist society, and the fact that 500,000 people have died, disproportionately Black and other people of color. There is the lockdown that's led to a massive amount of job loss. And there is, I work in housing as a paralegal. So there are people who are thousands of dollars behind on their rent. And so what we're going to see when the moratoriums are over is that there's going to be a housing apocalypse. It's not going to all happen on one day, but you're going to see more and more people being kicked out of their homes and being made to be homeless. All these conditions, in this film coming at this particular time in history, there may not be, the global revolutionary fervor that existed in the 60s and 70s and before, but there are the conditions created that people are going to attribute to the capitalist system and the lack of a carrying infrastructure that exists, because bourgeois governments are much more interested in maintaining the status quo, and that is keeping the power concentrated in the hands of the ruling class. And so I believe that we have to, as much as we can, it's difficult now because people exist in a state of semi-isolation because of the pandemic, get this film out there and let people see it. I think people should also see the documentary, The Murder of Fred Hampton, but we know how people are. I interviewed Boots Riley a while ago, and he was talking about why there was the musical accompaniment to his rhymes, why he chose music that people can move to. And he said, people like to move. He said, so if people can move and they can listen to my lyrics, then it would help them to develop and grow. He said, so, I could choose different kind of beats, but, I'm looking at beats to where people want to dance, and people like to dance to funk music. And I think that a film of this caliber that is very well made film, it's an exciting film, it's a thriller. At the same time, it is a portrayal of one of the preeminent revolutionaries that existed in this country. And the programs of the Black Panther Party and what they stood for, and the struggles and the violence of the state and the ends that it will go to and the means that it uses, even using someone who was 17 years old when they roped him into it, who was basically still a kid. I think that the FBI would plant a bomb in a baby if they had the opportunity to do so. And that is very much on display in this film. And the conditions are very, very right. It's coming at the right time. And so I think it's not the only thing that we have to get out there. I think that many other things we need to be talking to people about, but it opens the door. And even if it opens it just a sliver, it provides us with an opportunity. And I think now we should take any opportunity we can get. So I'm very glad about the film. I'm very positive about the film. I think it's a well-made film, and I think it has a very deep political and social impact. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Larry. That was an excellent analysis. You really summed up a lot of things I felt, but haven't been able to summarize, which there are more Neils than Hamptons, which is like that framework, putting it simply like that really helps like contextualize where we're at right now. A couple of questions in the Q&A chat. I would love for other people to add discussion points and questions, and we can go ahead and move into the discussion portion of our panel. So I'll go ahead and read these first two questions, and please allow the panel to just jump in and answer whatever they feel comfortable with. The first question is from Gaza Goba. Apologies if I'm not pronouncing that right. And it is a three-part question. I'll read it all, and then I can reread or redirect these different sections. So the first section is considering all organizers are conditioned within violent matrices. How important is restorative transformative justice to the well-being, deepening of revolutionary relationships and movement building? And then in your life, if you have seen love with accountability regarding abusive behavior of organizers strengthen movement building, how has the lack of such structures impeded growth, and provide current historical examples? And then the last part of that question, in the case of William O'Neill specifically, how do movements address consequences with radical love framework considering the massive impacts of such infiltrators? So anybody who has feedback on any part of that, please go ahead and jump in. That applies Black radical teachings, but I'm worried because my friends aren't interested in political education and think being openly radical will, quote, make us look bad. What are some steps I should take or tips? And what do you think it will take for there to be a revolution, or at least for us as Black people to be where we were in the 70s?
Hey, Rebecca, do you mind if I take that on?
Yeah, please.
Okay. And I have to make dinner after this, so I might have to get off early. So I apologize for not being able to stay on longer. You know, I think one of the things is you know, it's interesting because there's a lot of times a lot of groups that want to instead of taking lessons from earlier periods in history, they want to recreate things that were done in an earlier period. And I think that's a mistake. You take your lessons from that period of mistakes that were made and things that were do good, and you apply them to the current conditions that exist. You can't recreate things that were done 50 years ago because the conditions have changed. There are different needs in the community, and you have to identify those needs before you start, you know, prescribing what the community actually needs. That's a little bit backwards. So I think it's important to do a deep dive and educating yourself about politics and understanding and having a systemic analysis. What are the primary contradictions that exist? What are we up against? What are the obstacles? What are some of the crises that we face nowadays? Is capitalism the problem? It is the primary problem. But what's the history of the development of capitalism? And what are the social relations that exist, and how do they differ between those who are oppressed and those who come from the dominant nationality in this country? And how do those things lend itself to the growth in not just numbers, but in the willingness to engage of people who are leaning towards fascism? You know, we have to identify where we are at on the historical map And I think that that's important to do. You know, someone told me, you know, as I've gotten, when I first came in the political movement, and I got away from a lot because I joined the military after becoming homeless, trying to go to school. And then it took me a while. And I'll be honest with you, when I was a paratrooper in the military, and I was like, I'm just going to get a job and get some stability. And when I got to my reception battalion, this guy came in and he's like, you've been wasting space and you've been wasting my air for the entire time that you've been alive, but now you are going to pay for it. And they showed this recruiting video. I had already been recruited. And it had, I forgot the song. It was a song, I Need a Hero. And then the images were things being blown up. And you'd be surprised how quickly like people get like, you get all excited and be like, oh, I'm going to be doing this. I'll be jumping out of airplanes and shit like that. And so that indoctrination takes a while to sort of to wear off. And it's not like I had not still kept some of my politics, because I would get in arguments with people all the time, and didn't necessarily fit in very well. But once I was kicked out of the military, because I was kicked out, it took me a while to get back. And it wasn't until 9/11 when I had this professor who said, they canceled all the classes after that, but she said, I want you to pay attention to what's going to happen. So watch the news. I was working in a coffee shop. I managed a coffee shop, and so I didn't hear what happened. And some guy came in and said they blew up the bomb, and I was like, they blew up the World Trade Center. I said, who was they? He said, the Arabs. I was like, how do you know? Were you there? He said, no, but I can only assume. And I said, don't you think that's just the reason that we're here in the first place? I said, don't you think that there are a lot of people who have a lot of grievances with this country anyway? And that those grievances are because of the things that we did to them. So you think that we're going to go and create more enemies and that's going to actually solve the problem. And I almost got fired for that. But then I went to my class later that day, and she got a standing ovation after that class. It was a theater class. It was a theater size auditorium. And she basically laid down the entire history of US imperialism. And she said that you were going to see a drive for war, and we were going to go to war. And they're going to use this as the rationale for war. And that's exactly what happened. And I went after that class and I joined the Colorado Campaign for Middle East Peace. I'd never been out of the country. Before I knew it, 6 months from then, I was in Palestine. But back to my original point, you know, I think that we have to look at the time. We have to be able to read the time that we're in correctly. We have to, because one of the crises is an ideological and political crisis that exists in this country. And to be able to address the needs of the people and to be able to talk to people, we got to know what it is that we're talking about and what we're up against and how we got here in the first place. So that's an important part that you have to start with. And then I think find some friends, some political friends, some like-minded people. And I think that one of the things that we have to do here is we have to begin to build alliances. You know, there's a left organization that dies every day and then 10 more are born from that death. We have to begin to devise some political unity, because we will attract people when we have some political unity. We're not attracting, we talk to a lot of the same people. There's a big movement out there, and it ebbs and flows. It comes in periods and then it goes away, and like, what happened to it? The more unity that exists in the revolutionary movement, the more we'll be able to win some of those people who come out in the streets and they struggle against the state. Otherwise, they're going to be attracted to other forces who have more gravity and who are going to lead them back to the status quo, back to the Democratic Party. And that's not what we want. We want them to become revolutionaries, but we have to be attracted to be able to win them over. And if we continue to fight over our personality differences or what little political differences that exist, we are not going to be attractive. And that's the reason why I look at the film the way that I look at the film. Yeah, it's got some mistakes. Yeah, it's a Hollywood film, right? A lot of these films are, but we don't throw the whole thing out. We have to know how to talk to people. because we can't, we give people leaflets, but the best leaflet is ourselves and our body and the words that we use when talking to people. And we reel them in. Because that's one of the great things that the Panthers did. You have to be able to talk to people in plain proletarian English. And if we can't do that, if we can't see where people are at, like I got into an argument with somebody about this is my last point, about video stores. And they were like, well, I didn't go to video stores, I went to libraries, and that's where I gathered and met people. I'm like, really? That's fine. But guess what? A lot of people on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday nights went to a video store. They milled around for a couple of hours. Sometimes they went home with nothing, but they talked to other people about the films that were on the shelves at the movie theater. We have to know where people are at. We have to be able to talk to them where they're at, and we have to be able to guide them into another direction. And to be able to do that and be successful, we have to build unity amongst ourselves. So, my prescription for how you actually go about building or organizing with people is you start and educate yourself, you find some political points of unity, you find some other people you can agree with, you organize with them, and you build from that. All right.
Thank you, Larry. Does anyone else want to address that specifically as well? And I'll also just mention now, Russell in the chat kind of mentioned some of the things you were just talking about, Larry, or framed it in a question about, I know a lot of folks who are interested in the struggle, but that are also averse to reading theory. So I've been looking for ways to educate and inform those types as well. I think we should meet working class people and oppressed folks where they are. How do our speakers feel about that? And I think you definitely touched on a lot of those issues and couldn't agree more. You have to meet the people where they're at. Does anyone else want to kind of like chime in specifically now that we're talking about this?
I think it is very important to be able to meet people where they are. I mean, there's one thing that I did observe during the days of the movement, is that those who were willing and able to do that got a lot further than people who got caught in this talking to themselves with fellow radicals and what have you. And then the question then gets to be, how do you do that? How do you form the kinds of relations which will make movement possible? And I'm not going to say, you just try to go back to the 60s and redo what was done. But there may be certain things you're going to learn that happened, that worked, and which might work now. I don't know about maybe carrying rifles like the Panthers do. I remember listening to Bobby Seale. I mean, whatever he's doing now, he's an idea. He says, how about form groups? Instead of patrolling with rifles, you patrol with, the kind of screening material and recording. And of course, he said we didn't have any, right? In fact, I remember there was some meetings at Harriet place, I believe it was, not long after the murder of Freddie Gray and the uprising. And some people were talking about some of the options, right? How do we deal with the police? Well, maybe we can have groups of people who watch things, who patrol, who talk to people, and who watch what's going on. And, so there are certain things you might want to think about, options you can have, maybe there are new tactics and programs that will have to be invented over time. Some of the old ones might need to be revised, and then maybe some new ones. If you were organized in the 1960s, you certainly couldn't use this recording technology that exists, right? So what did capitalism, for better or worse, is known for this relentless technological innovation, not for human development, but for profit, but nonetheless it does happen. And so when it happens, the question is, all right, a lot of destructive things are happening because of this. But what can we do with it that can be turned to our advantage? You know, everybody is somewhere. You belong to a church, you're in school, what have you. Wherever you're situated, I guess the question is, how do I reach people where not only they are, but where we are? All right. None of us are suspended in space. Right? You have a job, you're maybe a student in school, you belong to a church, you may belong to, and think about how to raise the struggles that already exist to a higher level. And I don't think anyone can simply give you a blueprint. I certainly, I don't have one. It's something that's worked out in the course of the struggle itself. But we can have some ideas, we can exchange ideas and try out and see what works and what doesn't.
Dr. BIRT. I'm going to go ahead and try to get us through the next couple of questions, and please everyone continue to contribute to the questions and comments in either the Q&A or the chat. And so this next question is from Andrew Concone. Once again, apologies if I mispronounced your name. And the question is, how can we form a new rainbow coalition? Can we connect the national liberation movements that are operating here in the US? And once again, I feel like we're kind of talking about some of these things, but if anyone wants to kind of touch on that specifically, that'd be great. And maybe somebody wants to comment on how the PPA kind of functions in that way. Reverend Chambers, unmute.
Okay. First, let's just talk about the Rainbow Coalition. In this struggle, there has always been a Rainbow Coalition. There has always been. I know that we're talking about the party, but there's always been a need for all people to come together to fight this. All working class, poor people in this country and oppressed people need to come together to fight and work together. How can we build it? I think it's being built right now at the best, as best I've seen it in my 79 years. I see young people of all races, creed, and colors coming together and fighting to make change within this capitalist system that we have. I just think that some of us need to not stand in the way of the young people. And, I love giving advice. I love giving the history, and I'll fight beside you. But I love when young brothers and sisters stand up and fight. That keeps me going, because that means that all the fighting that I have done is not in vain. And we need to motivate and pull out more young people. Sometimes I walk along the street and I see groups of young people, and I'm never afraid of any young person or anybody, period. I walk with the Holy Spirit, and I'll stop and I'll stop them. They may be doing other things, but I'll stop them and I'll talk to them. And then they ask me, where can I learn more? See, so, that's what I'm saying about the school system. We needs to set up another system, because school system is not going to teach our children the true history, their true history, or teach even history in this country. And when people talk about the revolution, we're in the revolution. This is the revolution. Now, Minister Malcolm, which I'm a product of, had some real strong words for us one time when we talked about a revolution, you see, as Black people. And Fidel is gone, Castro, who did lots for the Black movement in this country and for Black people, who did a lot, I mean a lot, who he may never get credit, but I will give him credit, and others that know the truth should give him credit, because they had an embargo around his country, but he still managed to get money out to the movement. He still managed to get other resources out to the movement. We learned to fight right in Cuba with the jungle fighters to teach us how to come back and fight our revolution. But getting back to Minister Malcolm, he said we could not pick up arms and go into a revolution like Cuba did. And he explained why. Because we would be wiped out as a people. But we have to fight our revolution just like y'all young people are doing right now. You're fighting it in the streets. You're fighting it in the corporate boards. You're fighting it in the legislators. You're fighting and you're making change. And all over, all over the world, see the Rainbow Coalition of America. Because I know that they're killing us and they're brutal, but how, we would have fought and said the police have just beat one of us to death, and they could lie and make up excuses. What happened? But you all are bringing it all to the forefront. And so the Bill of Revolution is all of the groups and all of the so-called organizations that truly want to make change within this system can stand together. If you're having a demonstration, I should be there to support you and you support me. We should all come together and say, let's get rid of police brutality. Let's make sure that people have the basic human needs that they need: food, clothing, shelter. We shouldn't have a debate right now about whether we're going to give this group of stimulus and that group of stimulus. Hell, everybody is hungry. Every poor working class person is hungry. Everybody needs help. So these are the things that we should be fighting. And I like, that there are more Black people in legislative positions. Just got to keep their head on, because once they get there, then they forget what they were put there to do and what it's about. So we got to hold accountable. But you see, I see young people like y'all coming along who do have your head on, and y'all doing some things. Y'all doing some things, and that's great. So that's the way we build the coalition. The coalition is built. Just keep on building on it, adding to it. That's what we got to do. And we can't set back. No, we can't go back. I would not want some of the things that went on in the past to come to the future now. I would not want those things. And I would want some of those. I have other names for them, but I'm going to be a good today. Some of those people, that set up in the pulpit and bulljive and do the Sunday morning disco to be a part of what's happening now. Okay? Because truly, if you follow Jesus Christ, he was a revolutionary. He was a revolutionary. He fought for change and to make a difference on this earth. So that's what we have to look forward to and teach. And any church that's going to come out, any mass, anybody that's going to come out. And, you know, as I said to one of my Iman friends, you know, what you really about? What you really about, brother? You got to understand that we all here together and we got to make the change. It is through us change will be made. You know, change will be made. You could be ostracized back in the day that you were a socialist, a communist, or whatever. And, you know, I remember my poor children fighting in school because, you know, when they got up and sung the Black national anthem, sung the national anthem, my children sung something else. And they didn't pledge to the flag. And so they were called communists. And I said, and hold your head up, yes. Wave the flag. Wave the flag. Don't stand there. Carry your red, black, and wave it. And I remember some of them being asked to leave the school and being, you know, but so that's why we got to talk about education. We got to educate our young people. We got to continue to educate them on who they are, what they are, and why we as a people have to be proud. But also working with poor whites and poor Hispanics and all, let me tell you, we all in a coalition. We all ready the Rainbow Coalition. I'm finished.
Thank you, Reverend Chambers. I do want to be conscious that we have, and Gloria, go ahead and answer that too. Just wanted to flag, we'll probably wrap up. We have one more question. If anybody else wants to contribute to this last question, we'll read that. And then I'd love to have everyone also just contribute kind of like closing thoughts and statements as well. Go ahead, Gloria.
You can go ahead and read the other question and then I can respond to that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Okay, this, and I do feel this question does kind of speak to what a lot of the things we're touching on now. So this last question is from Faramars, and he asked, what do you see as the long-term priorities in order to build a revolutionary movement that draws inspiration and insights from the Black Panther Party for Self-Defense adapted to current conditions? And so, yes, if whoever wants to jump in, Gloria, please, anything you'd like to add, and then we'll go as well through kind of closing thoughts.
Yeah, I'm sitting here. It's really different, difficult because, at the beginning of my presentation, I said that the focus of 2021 is to intensify the struggle to free, all political prisoners, all prisoners, immigration camps. I mean, we're in a pandemic here, and it's like having these Zoom calls. I've listened to a lot of Zoom calls with a lot of young people, and I think that young people are. I'm not saying that young people are lacking in historical knowledge. I'm not saying that young people, do not want to get deeper into history. I think it's just different now. Even this short period of time, this year 2020, where we're not able to do the things we want, like to talk one-on-one, to hand out flyers, to be open. I mean, a lot of this stuff is on Zoom. I prepared my presentation. I'm thinking about so many things on my mind. I mean, but it's kind of difficult not being able to really interact the same way, not really being able to hear the questions, not being able to see the expressions on the faces of people, and just realizing just what dire position that we're in right now. I'm here in Texas. I mean, I just, right now from this storm, which could have been entirely preventable if it wasn't for capitalism, if it wasn't for money before human needs. I mean, we wouldn't be without electricity, without water, without heat, without, it's just young people, I think they are aware of that. It's just so hard. History is hard because it's like, when you look at our history, it's like a history of, fighting and struggle and defeats and winning. It's like, it's like, you know, one step forward, two step backwards, you know. I mean, it's not an easy thing, but it's winnable. And see, we have to have more of discussion with our young people and really talk to them about socialism. I mean, and I see a lot of young people now, they really do want to embrace socialism. You know, look at a lot of people, you know, really embraced Bernie Sanders, even though that wasn't, you know, socialism. But I think that people want, you know, young people are looking at that. They're looking at healthcare. They're looking at, you know, rent and mortgage and jobs and homelessness. And right now, the medical disparities, I mean, the prison industrial complex, all these things, it's just huge, the environment. It's just a huge amount of issues that we're dealing with. You know, the minimum wage, you know, some people are saying, some young people say, well, if everybody makes $15, you know, we're going to lose our jobs, we're going to do this. But they have to understand that capitalism, as has been said already today, capitalism is the disease. It's something that, you know, we need to study capitalism, and also we need to really study socialism and look at the differences instead of, you know, look at the differences between two. Like, you know, the Socialist Unity Party, you know, and all the other socialists, the African Socialist Party, all these, you know, when you're looking at socialism, it's all about the people being in control of the means of production. You know, we have to talk to young people about what that really means, you know, you being in control of the means of production. You know, I mean, with this whole thing with utilities, I mean, should utilities be owned by, you know, should be owned by individuals, or should utilities be controlled by the states? I mean, if the utilities were controlled by the states, then Texas can't say, well, we don't want to, you know, we want to be in control of our own stuff. We're not going to, you know, spend money to you know, to fix the pipes. You know, we don't really believe it's climate change. I mean, should these corporations have that much control to be able to, you know, decide on who gets power and who doesn't, who gets water and who doesn't? I mean, so we have to look at these things really closely, you know, I mean, because and it's hard to do it in this kind of medium, but it's where we are, it's what it is. But, you know, one-on-one communication, talking to people, you know, having webinars like that where we can really interact, where people can, you know, come in and talk, it's a very difficult thing. But we still make it, we can still make it to the streets. We can still get into the streets and do stuff. So I think that the big issue here is unity, and we all talk about unity, unifying the left. And also, of course, taking people where they are. You know, when you have those conversations on the phone, on the internet, on chat, and you're taking people where they are and bringing up the real issues that are affecting them. You know, I just lost my job. You know, you know, even getting the vaccine now, it's like, you know, my you know, brothers and sisters and nieces and nephews and relatives that are in litigation, in jail, in prison, all these things. It's just an overwhelming amount of things that we need to talk about. And a lot of it, as far as me coming up, you know, trying to figure out how do we get to where we are. It's when I started learning my history, it's like, oh, this is where we got there, you know, and it took, you know, decades, you know, and centuries to get to where we are right now. And right now, like has been said before, we're in the revolution. We're in this is a time for change, and it could happen at any time. Change is inevitable. It's something that's got to happen because, you know, I mean, we are optimistic, and if you so anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but it's just very difficult, you know, trying to use the types of medium for me to use the type of medium that we're using right now, but we have to hang in together. And for the students that want, the people who want to start groups, I mean, young people, we have confidence in you. We know that you are on the right track. We know that you're out in the streets. We know that you're working hard, you're making big sacrifices, and we support you. And we're here for you to work as guidance, but we don't have all the answers. And just like Larry made reference to, sometimes you have to try new strategies and new things. So when you try something new, sometimes we have to sit back and say, okay, try that. You know, sometimes some things you try, we say, well, we've already tried that, but try that and see if it works. But unity is the key, okay? And working together and building coalitions is going to be, is the key to our new future and having those discussions about socialism. Thank you, Rebecca. That's it. Sorry, it took so long.
No, thank you, Gloria. That was amazing. If anyone else wants to answer that kind of last question, that'd be great. And if not, then we'll move on to closing statements.
I'll just say a little something here, and I'm going to try to keep it short. I'm actually optimistic, cautiously optimistic. There is a certain kind of activism that is reappearing. I mean, this summer, I call it the insurgent summer of 2020. It began in Black Minneapolis. It spread throughout the country and throughout the globe. It suggests that oppositional politics is still possible. But I would want to have one note of caution. The movement has to maintain its independence from the two corporate parties. I think that's very important, and we have to be very careful in that respect. There is, you have, for example, Reverend Barber, who's talking about, poor people's, trying to revive the poor people's campaign, which was perhaps one of the most radical things that came out of, in its original form, King and that sort of period. The capacity of the common people to be self-directed is something that is not to be underestimated, but you have to keep in mind there's some, of course, probably on the right, their attitude is that they just want to crush them. But then there are others who probably want to seduce it and buy it off. So we have to be aware of that. The movement has to, I'm not going to say don't get involved in electoral parliament, I'm not going to be nonsensical. But I do want to say, we got to make sure that when our movements emerge, their leadership is self-generated and accountable to the people who they're quote unquote leading. We'll have to have organizational and political and ideological independence. But it's very encouraging that tens of millions of people who rose up and revolted against police terror directed more against Black and Latin communities, but it spread throughout in the whole country. I think that's very encouraging. And with regard to socialism, even I don't worship polls and surveys, but for years now, it's been these things have shown that more and more people, especially young people, are skeptical of capitalism, and more young people are even saying they favor socialism over capitalism. They may not be clear what they mean by socialism, but it does mean they're looking for something alternative to what we have now, and that's good. Because when you start looking for something, see, if you're not looking for something, you don't have no questions, then, not much to be discussed. But at the point where you're saying, no, this is work, I need something else, what should it be? Socialism, what is that? This is important, right? This is great. Young people are asking questions. That's great. Hey, insurgent youth, I love you madly. But keep your independence. Very important, keep your independence.
So I think we can go ahead and just go ahead and move into the last kind of closing statements. Reverend Chambers, if we can start with you, just any last closing words or things you'd like to add before we close off for the evening?
Yes. Yes, I want to say to the young people and to people in general that's working class and poor that we are in the revolution and we in a struggle, we in a battle. But make no doubt about it, we're gonna win. We're gonna win. America is crumbling. America as a country is crumbling every day, every day. So I say to them that you dare to struggle and you dare to fight. But once they dare you and you do it, you will win. Socialism is the way to go. We have got to teach our young people socialism ways so that we won't have the crime, the miseducation, and the abuse that's going on in this society. And anyone that calls themselves a true Christian and call themselves a follower of Jesus Christ is a socialist. If you're not, then you're not a follower.
Thank you, Reverend Chambers. Dr. Burt, you're on mute. Dr. Burt. No, no, if you were talking, Dr. Burt, we can't hear you.
I guess I was going to say, I don't know, there's a lot more that I have to say than what I've already said. I'm encouraged by the resurgent activism I'm seeing at these protests that we saw, these demonstrations we saw in Baltimore in the summer. They were bigger than some of the ones we had in the 1960s. People are ready to move. You got to figure out the strategy. And we also have to make sure that we're able not to either get sucked into, these traps, which end up subverting the movement. So, I'm very encouraged by it. I'm very encouraged. I mean, some of my students are out here. I marched with some of them. I'm very encouraged. But I also want to encourage them to learn from the past. Don't get trapped in the past. Learn from it, move forward, and develop self-determined, accountable organization and leadership.
Thank you. And Gloria?
Yeah, I just want to say that that I guess I will go ahead and say something that Kwame Ture, aka Stokely Carmichael, said. I mean, join an organization. We can do a lot as individuals, but we can do great things if we join and unite and work together. Join an organization, start a study group within your own. Watch some of these films together with a group. I know that on the internet they have watch parties. Check out the events page and participate in some of these webinars and seminars. We're expecting to have more of these here with the Socialist Unity Party and other parties, and form your own decisions. We trust you. We know that our class is is really is a socialist class. That's our class. That's who we are. We don't have to really ponder. I mean, because what we speak, what we say, what we want socialism. I mean, but just like we've all said here, we have to learn what socialism is, what it means. So join an organization, participate in all of these like webinars or Zoom things, and participate, ask questions, and that's all. I mean, power to the people. People are going to do this, and you are the people. Just like it said in that video, it's the people that's going to get us out of this. And long live revolution. And thank you so much for having this. Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Reverend Chambers. And it's just so great. And Professor Burt, it's so great to be in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you, Gloria. And yeah, so please continue to stay involved, stay linked in, continue to share this information. These links will be live on YouTube. So, you know, encourage anybody who couldn't attend to watch this and be able to be inspired. Make sure in the chat that you have the links for Struggle La Lucha. Also I'll drop again for Mumia's support. That's in there a few times. Yes, Gloria. Yes. So please make sure that you're going to that site and then taking those actions, because once again, there's some very important things that we need to get done right now, which is making sure that Mumia is getting the treatment and of course demanding his release. Continue to stay in touch. Social media, we have the Harriet Tubman Center on Instagram, Struggle La Lucha, and you'll see also we're dropping peoplespower.assembly.org. Thank you also to everyone that's been supporting to make this happen. Russell, John Parker, Sharon Black in the background, our amazing tech team bringing this together. Once again, just stay in touch, be on the lookout for the next panel. Feel free to reach out to any of us. It's been a real honor and a pleasure just being here, learning, growing with everybody. So until next time, good night, everyone. Bye.